Hello, my name is Andy and I am the Village Idiot. I'm armed with a car and a GoPro and an unhealthy amount of time on my hands. I'm using that time to attempt to visit every civil parish in England. You're watching the Harrogate series. Harrogate is a large borough, one of the 11 districts of North Yorkshire. It's got 139 civil parishes. Which one are we in this episode? Welcome back to Harrogate again, folks. Now, as you know, my plan is to visit every civil parish in England, and I've defined visiting a parish as making sure I set foot, as in walk, inside the parish boundaries. Now, I can do that with this episode, and I'm doing it right now because this road I'm currently walking on is within the boundaries of today's parish. However, this is the only road that I'm technically speaking allowed on in this place, because everything else is either a private road or it's something that I can't get the car down, like a footpath or a bridleway. And to be honest with you, there's nothing really to film in this episode. This road is barren. It's basically just trees and a road, as you can see. We're going to drive down it and see exactly what's here. This is the parish of Ellenthorpe. Here's my disclaimer for people who may be watching me for the first time. I say things as I would in my native accent and dialect. As a result, I may not pronounce things in the same way as the locals do. Remember, I'm a visitor. It's impossible to know everything. Leave me a comment, spin me a like, and bash that subscribe button. Let's get to today's parish video. Ellenthorpe, Atheling's farm. Okay everyone, here's one that's going to be a challenge. This is Ellenthorpe, which is located on the northern bank of the River Ure. It's a challenge because there's really nothing to film out here. The parish has just one public road, and this is it. Even then it's a dead end because it runs into two farm tracks, which are both private. There are but a handful of houses, and at the last census just 34 people were recorded as living within the boundaries. Ellenthorpe is literally in the middle of nowhere. Despite the obvious lack of any landmarks, Ellenthorpe does, however, have a few things we can cover. It has links to a very famous artist who once made sketchings of the biggest and most historic house in the hamlet. It's also associated with a family of landed gentry, the Brookes from York. And going back to 1319, part of Ellenthorpe was the scene of a battle. It's tiny, yes, but still very interesting. I usually say let's walk at this point, but that's kind of impossible. So instead, let's fire up the car and drive instead. So this is Ellenthorpe's only public road. This runs from Milby in the west to a dead end, defined by two private farm tracks. The parish boundary in the east is a stream called Myton Pasture Stell, which runs into the River Swale. You could count on one hand the number of houses on this road. About a quarter of the way down it, you come to two of them, Ivy Nook and Beech Cottage. They stand either side of a private road that leads to the hamlet's biggest and most historic property. That would be Ellenthorpe Hall, a Grade 2 listed and Victorian house dating from the early 19th century. It's made of brick and has a Westmoreland slate roof. The house stands close to the northern bank of the River Ure, facing Aldborough, close to the point where an ancient routeway crossed the river just downstream. The current hall is not the original. It replaced an earlier hall, although it's unclear exactly where that stood. What is known, though, is that it was much closer to the river. and the reason we know that is all thanks to a famous British artist. I'm willing to bet you're at least semi-familiar with Turner, the 18th and 19th century London-born painter who was famed for his landscapes. He never painted anything here, but he did do some sketchings. On your screen now is Turner's sketching of the original Ellenthorpe Hall, which he did in 1816. It was simply titled Ellenthorpe Hall Looking Down the River Ure. You can see from his depiction the hall was dangerously close to the river. As we know, the course of a river can alter, but it's much more likely that the hall was re-sited when it was rebuilt, further away from the riverbank. We return to the road, and this next section is pretty narrow. You can see from the car coming the other way how tight this lane is. There are a handful more properties along the lane. They're all on the right hand side and they're called Ellenthorpe cottages. After those, the lane continues to a dead end and you're there in under a minute. Although tiny, Ellenthorpe was of enough interest to the Brookes family in the mid-17th century. Sir John Brookes was the most notable at that time. He was a politician, the only member of the family to sit in Parliament, and was elected in 1679. He was re-elected in 1681 and attended the Oxford Parliament, seemingly as one of the more militant of the country party, though he took no known part in its proceedings. His father James remained in York whilst it was a royalist garrison and was forced to lend money to the king under the Yorkshire engagement. Nevertheless, he prospered sufficiently to buy the Ellenthorpe estate. We've now reached the end of the lane. A private track ahead of us leads to Clot House Farm. There's a second track off to the right, and that goes to Ellenthorpe Lodge. Ellenthorpe Lodge is the second of the two Grade 2 listed buildings in the hamlet. It's the headquarters of Lister Farms, who own and manage the land around here. Their family name has been associated with the area since the late John Lister took on the tenancy at the sovereign-owned Crown Estate farm in the late 1950s. His sons now breed and finish pigs for slaughter across 5,000 acres, mostly spread throughout North Yorkshire, including their 500-acre Borough Bridge base, which doubles up as an arable plot comprising of wheat, barley, potatoes and oilseed rape. They also run a flock of sheep and a herd of Aberdeen Angus cattle. The Listers employ more than 50 staff and sell their pork to major supermarkets like Tesco, the Co-op and Aldi through the molten pork producer Carrow Foods. They also deal with West Midlands-based Tulip Limited, another supplier of pork to major retailers, and Woodheads, the livestock division of Morrisons supermarkets. And that's pretty much it for the things you can see in Ellenthorpe, but part of the parish has something you can't. In 1319, the far eastern portion of Ellenthorpe, close to Myton Pash Distell, was the scene of a battle. A year earlier, in 1318, and during the Scottish Wars of Independence, Berwick-upon-Tweed fell to the Scots. This prompted King Edward II to lay siege to the town in an effort to recapture it. To create a diversion, the Scots sent a force of some 15,000 men to ravage Yorkshire. Their depredations were such that the Archbishop of York at that time, William de Melton, led a scratch force of about 15,000 clerics and townsfolk out of York to Myton, hoping to surprise the Scots. This would lead to the Battle of Myton being nicknamed the Chapter of Myton or the White Battle because of the number of clergy involved. It was a major engagement in the First Scottish War of Independence, and it was fought on the 20th of September 1319. The inexperienced English army was no match for the Scots. They crossed the small bridge and advanced in disorder, whereupon the Scots encircled and routed them. Many of the English were drowned in the Swale, although the Archbishop escaped. The battlefield is today much the same as it was in 1319, with hay pasture dominant, but medieval ploughlands are evident in the form of ridges and furrows. Two more recent tree belts separate the bridgehead from the Scots' position. You can access the battlefield via a public right-of-way between Myton Bridge and Clot House Farm. And that's pretty much it. Ellenthorpe has nothing more than that, I'm afraid, folks. The rest of the parish is off limits to us because we can't go up private farm tracks. It is worth noting, though, that you can see Ellenthorpe Hall on foot if you're prepared to walk along the banks of the River Ure from Milby Lock. Okay, so I've driven back down the road to where we began, to where this video began, and that's effectively it. There's nothing else I can film here in Ellenthorpe. That is your lot, I'm afraid. The parish boundary is a bit strange. It runs down that road towards the end of it, opens up at this end, but yeah, there's nothing much more to show you. That is it. There isn't really anything of any historical note out here, you know, nothing in the fields or anything like that. It really genuinely is just fields, farmland, and those farms and houses which you saw on the drive. That's it. And you know what? If every single parish was as easy as this, then A, the channel would be boring, and B, I'd be through it all in about a year, wouldn't I? Oh well. I suppose you have to do the little ones and the big ones in equal measure. Let's move on to the next one. Thanks for watching this video, folks. Don't forget to like this episode if you haven't already. It really makes a difference with YouTube. If you're new here, subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us a share too if you've got friends who'd like it. You can find all the links to my social media accounts below, as well as my Buy Me a Coffee page where you can donate to the channel. Also, if you've enjoyed this episode, have a look at some more videos in this series. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as the Village Idiot, and I'm out.